Arya Silva never thought her life would become a bargaining chip to end a gang war. But when she steps onto a private airstrip at dawn, face to face with Kyle Draven, the ruthless kingpin who just bought her like property, everything she knew shatters in an instant. One look from him, and she understands. This isn't negotiation. This is ownership. This is the story of a woman who was traded to save her family, and the monster who refused to let her go. If you want to see how far this obsession goes, hit like and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The hangar smelled like jet fuel and something darker, fear maybe, or the metallic tang of a deal sealed in blood. Arya Silva stood on the cracked concrete, her father's hand gripping her elbow so tight it would leave bruises. She didn't pull away. She couldn't. The early morning light sliced through the open hangar doors, harsh and unforgiving, painting everything in shades of gray. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," her father said, his voice low, cracked at the edges. He wouldn't look at her. Hadn't looked at her since they left the house 2 hours ago. Arya's throat burned. She wanted to scream, to claw at him, to demand how he could do this, how he could hand over his own daughter like she was nothing more than a signature on a contract. But the words died before they reached her lips. What good would they do? The decision had been made weeks ago, in rooms she wasn't allowed into, by men who measured her worth in territories and ceasefires. Across the hangar, a black sedan idled, engine purring like a predator at rest. Beside it stood 3 men in dark suits, faces blank, hands clasped in front of them. And in the center, leaning against the hood with an ease that felt obscene given the circumstances, was Kyle Draven. Arya had seen his photograph once. Her father had thrown it on the kitchen table during one of his rages, shouting about territories and bloodshed and the Silva family's dwindling options. The photo hadn't done him justice, or maybe it had been too kind. Kyle Draven was tall, taller than her father, broader through the shoulders, but it wasn't his size that made her stomach drop. It was the way he existed in space, like gravity bent around him. His suit was perfectly tailored, charcoal gray, no tie. His dark hair was pushed back from his face, still damp, like he'd showered before coming to collect his prize. His eyes, pale gray, almost colorless in the dawn light, tracked her approach with the focus of a man appraising an asset. He didn't smile, didn't move, just watched. Her father's grip tightened as they crossed the distance. Arya forced herself to breathe, to keep her chin up, to not give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. She'd spent the last 2 weeks crying in her bedroom, screaming into pillows, begging her mother to intervene. None of it had mattered. Her mother had stopped meeting her eyes 3 days ago. When they were 10 feet away, Kyle straightened. The movement was subtle, but it shifted the entire energy of the space. The men behind him tensed. Her father stopped walking. "Mr. Silva." Kyle's voice was smooth, low, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to command attention. "Right on time." "Mr. Draven." Her father's hand trembled against her arm, just once. Then he steadied himself, drawing up to his full height, still shorter than Kyle by 3 inches. "As agreed." "As agreed," Kyle echoed, and those pale eyes slid from her father to Arya. The world tilted. She'd expected cruelty, expected leering, possessiveness, something overt and ugly that she could hate cleanly. But Kyle Draven looked at her the way someone might look at a sculpture in a museum, with interest certainly, but also a strange sort of detachment, like he was studying her, measuring her against some internal standard she couldn't begin to guess. "Miss Silva." He inclined his head, a mockery of politeness. "I hope the drive wasn't too uncomfortable." Arya's mouth went dry. She should say something, anything, but her voice had abandoned her, retreating somewhere deep inside where this wasn't happening, where she wasn't standing in a hangar at dawn being handed over to a stranger who ruled half the city's underworld with violence and fear. Her father cleared his throat. She's a good girl, smart. She won't cause you trouble." Heat flooded Arya's face. Humiliation, rage, something jagged and burning. Won't cause trouble. Like she was a dog being rehomed. Kyle's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those cold eyes. Amusement, maybe. Or contempt. "I'm sure we'll get along just fine." He extended a hand, not to her father, but to her. Arya stared at it. Long fingers, no rings, a faint scar across the knuckles. A hand that had signed contracts and pulled triggers, and now wanted to claim her with a gesture that looked almost civilized. "Come here, Arya." Her father's voice cracked on her name. She didn't move. "Arya." Sharper now, desperate. Kale lowered his hand. "It's all right, Mr. Silva. She can take her time." He shifted his weight, crossing his arms over his chest. "We have all morning." But they didn't. Her father's breathing had gone shallow, panicked. The deal was fragile. Arya had heard enough through closed doors to know that much. The ceasefire hinged on this exchange. If she refused, if she ran, if she made a scene, the violence would start again. More bodies, more bloodshed. Her younger brother's name had come up once, whispered late at night when her parents thought she was asleep. The choice had never been hers. She pulled her arm free from her father's grip. He let her go too easily, and closed the distance between herself and Cale Draven in 4 measured steps. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. He smelled like expensive cologne and something sharper underneath, something that made her think of steel and smoke. "There," she said, and was shocked by how steady her voice came out. "I'm here. Are we done?" Cale's mouth curved just barely, not quite a smile. "Not even close." He turned to her father. "The money's been transferred. Your debts are cleared. The North Side territories revert to Silva control as of midnight tonight." His tone was businesslike, efficient. "We're square." Her father nodded too quickly, too eagerly. "Yes. Yes, we're square." He glanced at Arya, and for a split second she saw it. The guilt, the shame, the terrible knowledge of what he'd done. Then he looked away, and the moment shattered. "Take care of her." Cale didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge the request. He just gestured toward the sedan, a subtle motion that brought one of his men forward to open the rear door. "After you," he said to Arya. She wanted to say no, wanted to turn and run, to force her father to chase her, to make him see what he was doing. But her legs moved on their own, carrying her toward the open door, toward the black leather interior that smelled like wealth and endings. She slid into the back seat. Kyle followed, settling beside her with the kind of relaxed confidence that made the spacious interior feel suddenly cramped. The door closed with a heavy, final sound. Through the tinted window, Arya watched her father stand alone on the concrete, shoulders slumped, hands hanging useless at his sides. He didn't wave, didn't move. Just stood there as the sedan pulled away, as the hangar shrank in the distance, as everything she'd ever known disappeared behind them. "Seatbelt," Kyle said. Arya's hands shook as she buckled herself in. The driver navigated out of the private airfield and onto the empty highway, heading toward the city skyline just beginning to catch the morning sun. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Finally, Arya couldn't stand it anymore. "So what now?" Her voice came out harsher than intended. "You got what you paid for. What happens next?" Cale turned his head, studying her profile. "Now we go home." "That's not my home." "It is now." The certainty in his tone made her stomach twist. "I have a life, school, friends. I'm supposed to graduate in 3 months. You'll graduate." She whipped her head toward him. "What?" "You'll finish your degree, attend your classes, maintain your schedule." He said it like he was reading from a list. "I'm not interested in disrupting your education." Arya blinked, thrown. She'd expected a cage, expected to be locked away, hidden, treated like contraband. "Why?" "Because you earned it." He shifted in his seat, angling toward her. "Your father's an idiot and a coward, but you're not. You've maintained a 3.9 GPA while your family's empire crumbled around you. You volunteer at a community center on Thursdays. You tutor underclassmen in economics." His lips twitched. "You're also not half as invisible as you think you are." Ice slid down her spine. "You've been watching me." "Due diligence." He said it without apology, without shame. "I don't make investments without research." "I'm not an investment. I'm a person." "You're both." The casual brutality of it stole her breath. Arya turned away, pressing her forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching the city wake up around them. Cars appeared on the highway. Streetlights blinked off. Ordinary people heading to ordinary jobs, unaware that next to them, in a black sedan with tinted windows, a woman's entire existence was being rewritten. "I won't make this easy for you," she said to her reflection. "I don't want easy." Cale's voice was closer now, like he'd leaned in. "Easy is boring." She closed her eyes, fighting the urge to scream. The rest of the drive passed in tense silence. The city grew denser around them, high-rises and glass towers, construction scaffolding and morning traffic. They crossed into the financial district, where the buildings gleamed and the streets were cleaner, and pulled into an underground parking garage beneath one of the tallest structures Arya had ever seen. The elevator ride to the penthouse took 43 seconds. Arya counted them, focusing on the numbers ticking upward on the display. Anything to avoid thinking about the man standing beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. The doors opened onto a private foyer, marble floors, recessed lighting, a single door at the end. Kale moved past her, pressing his palm to a biometric scanner. The lock disengaged with a soft click. "Welcome home," he said, pushing the door open. The penthouse was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around three sides, offering a panoramic view of the city sprawling below. The interior was sleek, modern, all clean lines and neutral tones. White leather furniture, dark wood accents, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than her father's house. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. "Your room is down the hall," Kael said, shrugging out of his suit jacket and draping it over the back of a chair. "Second door on the left. Your things should already be there." Arya's head snapped toward him. "My things?" "Clothes, toiletries, your laptop." He moved to the kitchen, pulling a bottle of water from the fridge. "I had them packed and delivered yesterday." "You—" She couldn't finish the sentence. The violation of it choked her. Someone had been in her room, touching her belongings, packing her life into boxes without her knowledge or consent. Kael twisted the cap off the bottle, taking a long drink. When he lowered it, his expression was unreadable. "You can redecorate if you don't like the setup. Buy whatever you need. The credit card in the nightstand has no limit." "I don't want your money." "You'll take it anyway." He set the bottle down, leaning back against the counter. "Here's how this works. You live here. You attend your classes. You come home afterward. You don't go anywhere I don't approve. You don't speak to anyone I haven't vetted. You don't make decisions without clearing them through me first." Each word landed like a physical blow. "You're insane." "I'm careful." His tone didn't change, didn't rise. "The people who wanted your father dead still exist. The only reason they're not coming after you is because you're under my protection now. Step outside those boundaries and you become a target, a liability. Do you understand?" Arya's chest heaved. "I understand that you think you own me." "I do own you." He said it simply, like he was stating a fact. "But I'm not interested in breaking you. You're more valuable intact." The laugh that burst out of her was brittle, jagged. "Valuable, right, like furniture, like an asset worth protecting." Kael pushed off the counter, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. Arya stumbled back, but he didn't follow, just stopped a foot away, watching her with those pale, unnerving eyes. "I know you're angry, I know you feel trapped, but rage won't change your situation. Neither will defiance." He tilted his head. "What will change it is time, understanding, and eventually, acceptance." "I'll never accept this?" "We'll see." He turned and walked away, disappearing down a hallway on the opposite side of the apartment. A door closed somewhere in the distance, leaving Arya alone in the vast, empty living room. She stood there, trembling, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Then she moved, fast, frantic, down the hall he'd indicated, past the first door to the second. She shoved it open. The room was twice the size of her old bedroom. King-size bed, walk-in closet, private bathroom with a rainfall shower and a tub big enough to drown in. Her clothes hung neatly in the closet, organized by color and type. Her books were stacked on the shelves. Her laptop sat on the desk, charging cable already plugged in. On the nightstand, just like he'd said, was a sleek black credit card with her name embossed on it. Arya grabbed the nearest object, a decorative ceramic vase, and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, pieces scattering across the polished hardwood floor. The sound felt good, felt real. She sank onto the edge of the bed, dropping her head into her hands, and finally let herself cry. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Kael left early each morning, returned late at night. Arya barely saw him. When she did, their interactions were brief, transactional. He asked if she needed anything. She said no. He reminded her of the rules. She ignored him. On the 4th day, she returned to campus. The driver, A silent, stone-faced man named Marcus dropped her off at the east entrance at exactly 8:30, 30 minutes before her first class. Arya had expected resistance, had braced for an argument the night before when she'd informed Kyle she was going back to school. But he just nodded, told her Marcus would drive her, and returned to his laptop. Now standing outside the familiar brick building where she'd spent the last 3 years, Arya felt the first genuine breath she'd taken since the hangar. Normal. This was normal. She climbed the steps, pushed through the double doors, and let the familiar chaos of student life wash over her. Backpacks and coffee cups and hurried conversations about assignments and weekend plans. No one looked at her twice. No one knew. Her first class was behavioral economics with Professor Chen, a notoriously difficult lecturer who didn't tolerate tardiness or unprepared students. Arya slid into her usual seat near the middle, pulling out her notebook and pen. "Arya!" A familiar voice made her look up. Liana Park, her closest friend, dropped into the seat beside her, eyes wide with concern. "Oh my God, where have you been? You disappeared. I've been texting you for 3 days straight." Arya's stomach clenched. Her phone... She'd turned it off the morning of the exchange and hadn't turned it back on. "I'm sorry, family stuff. It's complicated." "Are you okay?" Liana reached out, squeezing her hand. "You look exhausted." "I'm fine," Arya lied, forcing a smile. "Just a rough week. I'll explain later." Professor Chen strode to the front of the room, calling for attention, and Liana settled back with a skeptical look that said this conversation wasn't over. The lecture passed in a blur. Arya took notes mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She was here. She was free. Or as close to free as she could get. Kyle had kept his word. She could finish her degree. She could... Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Unknown number. "How's class?" Her blood went cold. Another buzz. Unknown number. "Pay attention to Chen. His theories on loss aversion are relevant." Arya's hands shook as she typed back. "Arya, how did you get this number?" Unknown number. "I've always had this number." Unknown number. "Focus on your education, Arya. I'll handle everything else." She shoved the phone back in her pocket, heart hammering. Around her, students scribbled notes, oblivious. But Arya couldn't focus, couldn't breathe. He was watching. Even here, in the one place she thought she might escape him, Kyle Draven's presence suffocated her. The class ended. Liana grabbed her arm as they filed out. "Coffee? You look like you need it." "I can't. I have to." "Arya Silva?" They both turned. A man in a dark suit stood near the doorway, hands clasped in front of him. He looked like he could be Marcus's twin. Same build, same blank expression. "Your ride is waiting," he said. Liana's brow furrowed. "Your ride? Since when do you have a—" "I have to go." Arya pulled free, moving toward the man, her face burning. "Arya, wait!" But she didn't wait. She followed the man down the hall, down the stairs, out to where the black sedan idled at the curb. Marcus stood beside the rear door, opening it as she approached. "I have 3 more classes," Arya said tightly. "Mr. Draven asked me to bring you home." "It's 10 in the morning." Marcus's expression didn't change. "Mr. Draven asked me to bring you home." Arya wanted to scream, wanted to run, but she could feel eyes on her. Other students passing by, watching the strange tableau of a girl and a car that cost more than most of their tuitions combined. She got in the car. The drive back to the penthouse took 12 minutes. Arya spent all of them staring out the window, fury building in her chest like a living thing. Kyle was in the living room when she stormed in, standing by the windows with his phone pressed to his ear. He glanced at her, held up one finger, "Wait," and continued his conversation in a language she didn't recognize. Arya didn't wait. "What the hell was that?" she demanded the second he lowered the phone. Kyle pocketed it, turning to face her fully. "Good morning to you too. You pulled me out of class. You sent your goon to escort me out in front of everyone like I'm some kind of—" She couldn't find the words, couldn't articulate the humiliation that burned in her throat. "Like you're protected," Kyle finished calmly. "Yes, that's exactly what you are." "You said I could finish school." "You can, but not today." "Why not?" He moved past her, heading toward the kitchen. "Because I said so." Arya followed, her hands shaking with rage. "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you're getting." He pulled a glass from the cabinet, filling it with water from the tap. You'll return to campus tomorrow. Today, you stay here. This is insane. I have assignments, group projects. I can't just... You can. He turned, leaning against the counter, and for the first time since she'd arrived, something flickered in his expression, something dark and sharp. A man was seen on campus this morning. Eastern European accent, tattoo on his left hand. He was asking about you. The floor tilted. What? He's been dealt with, Kyle said, his tone flat. But until I'm certain there aren't others, you stay close. That's not negotiable. Arya's mouth went dry. Who was he? Someone who thinks you're still a Silva asset. Kale set the glass down. Someone who doesn't know you're mine now. The possessiveness in his voice made her skin crawl. I'm not yours. Tell that to the man I had to neutralize this morning to keep you safe. Silence crashed between them. What does that mean? Arya's voice came out smaller than she intended. Neutralize? Kale's expression didn't change. It means he won't be asking about you anymore. Her stomach turned. Did you? Ooh, don't ask questions you don't want answered. He pushed off the counter, closing the distance between them. You wanted normal. You wanted school and friends and your old life. But your old life doesn't exist anymore, Arya. The moment your father traded you, you became a target. The only thing standing between you and a bullet is me. I never asked you to. You didn't have to. His hand came up, and for a terrifying second, she thought he might touch her, but he just gestured vaguely toward the windows, toward the city beyond. This is the reality. You live in my world now. You follow my rules, and when I tell you to come home, you come home. Do you understand? Arya's chest heaved. She wanted to hit him, to scream, to do something to shatter that infuriating calm. I understand that you're a control freak who gets off on scaring people. Good. He stepped back, giving her space. Then we're on the same page. He walked away, leaving her standing in the kitchen, shaking with adrenaline and fear, and something else she didn't want to name. Mbasik. 2 weeks crawled by. Arya fell into a rhythm, reluctant, resentful, but functional. She attended classes with Marcus shadowing her from a distance. She studied in the penthouse library. She avoided Kyle when she could, which wasn't often. He was always there. At breakfast, sitting across from her with his coffee and his phone. At night, working in his study with the door half open. He didn't push, didn't demand conversation, but his presence was constant, inescapable, a weight she couldn't shake. And then came the incident with Professor Dalton. It started innocently. Dalton was her marketing strategy professor, mid-40s, charming in that self-aware way some academics cultivated. He'd always been friendly, maybe a little too friendly, but Arya had never thought much of it, until he asked her to stay after class. I wanted to check in, Dalton said, perching on the edge of his desk as the other students filtered out. You've seemed distracted lately. Is everything all right? Arya gathered her things, slinging her bag over her shoulder. I'm fine. Just a lot going on. Anything you want to talk about? He smiled, the kind of smile that was supposed to be reassuring but made her skin itch. My door's always open. Thanks, but I'm okay. She turned to leave, but his hand shot out, catching her wrist. Arya. She froze, staring down at where his fingers wrapped around her arm. Not tight, not painful, but unmistakable. Let go, she said quietly. I'm just concerned. His thumb moved, a small stroke against her pulse point. You know you can trust me, right? The door to the lecture hall slammed open. Kyle Draven strode in like a storm front, his expression carved from ice and fury. 2 of his men flanked him, but it was Kyle who commanded every ounce of attention in the room. Dalton dropped her wrist immediately, straightening. Excuse me, this is a private... Kyle didn't slow. He crossed the space in 4 strides, grabbed Dalton by the front of his shirt, and slammed him back against the desk hard enough to rattle it. Kyle... Arya started, but he held up one hand, silencing her without looking away from Dalton. What's your name? Kale's voice was soft, conversational, which made it infinitely more terrifying. Dalton's face had gone white. I'm Professor Dalton. This is my classroom. You can't... Your name, Kyle repeated, and your title are irrelevant. What's relevant is that you just put your hands on something that belongs to me. I didn't... She's my student. I was just... Kale's grip tightened. You were just what? Comforting her? Offering guidance? His smile was razor thin. Try again. This is assault, Dalton choked out. I'll call security. Hoa. Go ahead. Kale leaned in closer. While you're at it, explain to them why you have a habit of keeping female students after class, why 3 complaints have been filed against you in the last 2 years, why the university hasn't fired you yet. Oh, that's right. Your brother-in-law is on the board. Dalton's eyes widened. How do you... I know everything. Kale released him abruptly, stepping back. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to request a sabbatical, effective immediately. You're going to write a very sincere letter citing personal reasons. And you're never going to look at, speak to, or think about Arya Silva again. Do you understand? Dalton nodded frantically. Good. Kale turned, extending a hand toward Arya. Let's go. Arya didn't move. She was frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. The violence, the threats, the casual wielding of power and information that should have been impossible to obtain. Arya. Kale's voice softened, just barely. Now. She walked toward him on numb legs. His hand closed around hers, warm, steady, possessive, and he led her out of the classroom, past staring students in the hallway, down to where the sedan waited at the curb. Neither of them spoke until they were back in the penthouse. You can't do that, Arya said finally, her voice shaking. You can't just storm into my school and assault my professors. He touched you. Kale shrugged out of his jacket, tossing it over a chair. He won't make that mistake again. He was being inappropriate, yes, but you didn't have to... Didn't have to what? Kyle turned, and the ice in his expression cracked, revealing something darker underneath. Defend you? Protect you? Make it clear that there are consequences for crossing that line? I could have handled it myself. You shouldn't have to. He closed the distance between them, and this time, when he reached out, his hand cupped her jaw, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. You're mine, Arya. Mine to protect. Mine to defend. Mine to keep safe. And anyone who forgets that, anyone who even thinks about touching you, learns very quickly what that means. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, the gesture almost gentle. Arya's breath hitched. She should pull away, should slap him, scream, something, but she couldn't move, couldn't think past the heat of his palm against her skin, the intensity in those pale eyes. You're insane, she whispered. Probably. His lips curved. But I'm your insane now. He dropped his hand and walked away, leaving her standing in the middle of the living room, her heart pounding and her mind reeling with the terrible, undeniable truth. Part of her hadn't hated it. Part of her had felt something close to relief when Kyle walked through that door, when he'd pulled Dalton away, when he'd made it clear that she was under his protection. And that terrified her more than anything else. The days after the incident with Professor Dalton blurred together in a haze of tension and unspoken things. Arya returned to campus, but everything felt different now, tainted by the knowledge that Kyle's reach extended even there, into the one space she'd thought might remain hers. Marcus shadowed her everywhere, a constant dark presence 10 feet behind, and the other students had started to notice. Who's the bodyguard? Liana asked one afternoon as they sat in the campus coffee shop, her eyes tracking Marcus where he stood by the entrance, arms crossed, expression blank. Arya stirred her latte, not meeting her friend's eyes. It's complicated. Everything with you is complicated lately. Liana leaned forward, lowering her voice. Arya, what's going on? First you disappear for days, then you show up with a driver and security detail, and now Professor Dalton's suddenly on sabbatical, and everyone's whispering that it has something to do with you. It doesn't. Bullshit. Liana's hand shot across the table, gripping Arya's wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to make her point. I've known you for 3 years. You don't lie to me. So whatever this is, whatever you're caught up in, just tell me. Maybe I can help. Arya pulled her hand back, her throat tight. How could she explain? How could she put into words that her father had sold her to end a war? That she lived in a gilded cage with a man who controlled everything from her schedule to her safety? That she was starting to feel things she shouldn't feel for her captor? I can't, she said finally. I'm sorry, but I can't talk about it. Liana's expression shuddered, hurt flickering across her features. Fine. When you're ready to trust me again, you know where to find me. She gathered her things and left, and Arya sat there alone, watching her best friend disappear into the crowd of students, feeling the isolation close in around her like a fist. All right. That night, Arya didn't go straight home after her last class. She told Marcus she needed to stop by the library, then slipped out through the back entrance while he was scanning the main floor. It was stupid, reckless, but she needed to breathe, needed 1 hour where she wasn't being watched, where she could pretend her life was still her own. She walked through the city streets as dusk settled, the lights coming on in windows overhead, the sidewalks crowded with people heading home from work. No one paid her any attention. She was invisible again, anonymous, and the relief was so sharp it almost hurt. She ended up at a small park she used to visit during her freshman year, when everything had felt possible and the future had stretched out wide and bright. She sat on a bench beneath a streetlight, pulling her jacket tighter against the evening chill, and let herself exist in the quiet. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. With a sigh, she pulled it out. Kael, where are you? Kael, Marcus lost you 20 minutes ago. Where the fuck are you? Kael, answer me right now or I'm tearing this city apart to find you. Her stomach clenched. She started to type a response, then stopped. Let him worry. Let him feel a fraction of the powerlessness she felt every single day. The phone rang. She stared at the screen, Kael's name glowing there, and let it ring through to voicemail. It rang again immediately. And again. On the fourth call, she answered, What? Where are you? His voice was controlled, but she could hear the rage simmering beneath it, barely leashed. Out. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. She stood, pacing along the path. I needed space. I needed to not be followed for 5 goddamn minutes. You needed... He cut himself off, and she heard him exhale sharply. Do you have any idea what kind of risk you just took? Do you understand that there are people who would love nothing more than to grab you off the street and use you against me? Maybe that would solve both our problems. The silence that followed was arctic. Don't. His voice dropped to something deadly. Don't even joke about that. Who says I'm joking? Arya. He said her name like a warning, like a threat. Tell me where you are. Now. She looked around the park, the empty benches, the playground equipment, the single streetlight casting long shadows. Lincoln Park, the east entrance. Stay there. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. I'm coming to get you. I can get home on my... He'd already hung up. Arya shoved the phone in her pocket, her hands shaking. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of defiance. The wild rush of having done something he didn't control. It wouldn't last. She knew that. But for now, for these few minutes, she had taken something back. The black sedan pulled up to the curb 8 minutes later. The rear door opened before the car had fully stopped, and Kael stepped out. He looked furious. He crossed the sidewalk in 4 strides, grabbed her by the upper arms, and hauled her up onto her toes, his face inches from hers. Are you out of your fucking mind? Get your hands off me. You don't get to run. His grip tightened, not painful, but unyielding. You don't get to disappear into the city alone because you're feeling rebellious. That's not how this works. This doesn't work at all. She shoved at his chest, but he didn't budge. I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this. Like a prisoner, like property, like something you own. You are something I own. He said it flatly, like a fact. And you'll stay alive long enough to hate me for it. I already hate you. Something flickered in his expression. Pain, maybe, or something close to it. But it was gone before she could be sure. Good. Hate keeps you sharp. He released her abruptly, stepping back. Get in the car. No. Arya, I said no. She crossed her arms, planting her feet. You want me back at your penthouse? Make me. His jaw worked, a muscle ticking beneath the skin. For a long moment, he just stared at her, and she stared back, refusing to flinch, refusing to give him the satisfaction. Then he moved. He bent, grabbed her around the waist, and hauled her over his shoulder like she weighed nothing. Arya shrieked, pounding her fists against his back. Put me down, Kael. I swear to God. He carried her to the car, ignoring her struggles, and deposited her in the back seat. Before she could scramble out, he slid in beside her and slammed the door. The locks engaged with a sharp click. Drive, he said to Marcus, who'd appeared at the wheel. The car pulled away from the curb. Arya shoved herself into the far corner of the seat, breathing hard, fury and humiliation burning in her chest. You're an asshole. I'm an asshole who's keeping you alive. He didn't look at her, just stared straight ahead, his profile carved from stone. Which is more than you're doing for yourself right now. I don't need you to keep me alive. I need you to let me go. Not happening. Why? She turned to face him fully, her voice breaking. Why do you even care? I'm just a bargaining chip, a transaction. You said it yourself. I'm an asset. So why does it matter if I disappear? He turned his head then, those pale eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Because you're not just an asset anymore, he said quietly. And that's the problem. The words hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Arya's heart hammered against her ribs. What does that mean? Kale looked away, his jaw tight. It means we're both in more trouble than I planned for. He didn't elaborate, and the rest of the drive passed in tense silence. Back at the penthouse, Arya locked herself in her room and refused to come out. She heard Kyle moving through the apartment, footsteps in the hall, the clink of glass in the kitchen, the low murmur of a phone conversation. Eventually the sounds faded, and she was alone with her thoughts and the terrible, gnawing confusion of what he'd said. You're not just an asset anymore. What was she then? She didn't sleep that night. Just lay on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction she'd had with Kyle since the hangar. The way he looked at her, the way he touched her, rarely, but always with a deliberateness that felt significant. The way he'd torn into her classroom like an avenging angel when Dalton had crossed a line. It wasn't just possession, it was something else, something darker and more complicated. And the worst part was that she felt it too. That pull, that magnetic gravity that made her hyper-aware of him whenever he was near, that made her pulse spike when he said her name. She hated him. She was terrified of him. And somewhere beneath all of that, in a place she didn't want to examine too closely, she was starting to crave him. The next morning, she emerged from her room to find Kyle in the kitchen, making coffee. He glanced up when she appeared, his expression neutral. Morning. Arya didn't respond, just moved past him to grab a water bottle from the fridge. We need to talk about last night, he said. No, we don't. Arya, I don't want to talk to you. She twisted the cap off the bottle, taking a long drink. I don't want to look at you. I want you to leave me alone. That's not an option. Everything with you is not an option. You ever notice that? She slammed the bottle down on the counter. You ever consider that maybe, just maybe, I deserve a say in my own life? You have a say? His tone was maddeningly calm. Within parameters. Within your parameters, your rules, your control. She laughed bitterly. I'm a person, Kale, not a doll you can pose and move around. I know you're a person. He set his mug down, turning to face her fully. I know exactly who you are. Stubborn, intelligent, brave to the point of stupidity. You think I don't see that? You think I don't know what it costs you to live like this? If you know, then why? Because the alternative is worse. His voice hardened. You want freedom? Fine. Walk out that door. See how long you last before someone recognizes you, before word gets back to the wrong people, before you end up in a basement somewhere being used as leverage against me. Against you. It's always about you. It's about keeping you breathing. He closed the distance between them, and she backed up until she hit the counter, trapped. You want to hate me? Go ahead. Hate me all you want. But you'll do it alive. His hands came up, bracketing her on either side, caging her in without touching her. She could feel the heat radiating off him, could smell his cologne mixed with coffee and something uniquely him. You don't own me, she whispered. I know. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back up. But I'm keeping you anyway. The air between them crackled, charged with something dangerous and electric. Arya's pulse pounded in her ears. She should push him away, should slap him, should do anything except stand there, frozen, as he leaned in closer. The doorbell rang. Kale pulled back immediately, the moment shattering. He straightened, his expression closing off. Stay here. He moved toward the door and Arya sagged against the counter, her legs shaky, her mind reeling. She heard voices in the foyer, Kyle's, low and controlled, and another man's, unfamiliar. The conversation was brief, then footsteps, and Kale reappeared, his phone in his hand, his expression grim. I have to go out, he said. Business. I'll be back tonight. Okay? He paused, studying her. Marcus will be outside if you need anything. Don't leave the building. Wasn't planning on it. He nodded, then hesitated, like he wanted to say something else. But he just grabbed his jacket and left, the door closing behind him with a heavy finality. Arya stood in the kitchen for a long time after he was gone, her mind churning with everything she couldn't say, everything she didn't understand about what was happening between them. She spent the morning trying to focus on her assignments, but her concentration was shot. Every few minutes, she'd catch herself staring out the window, watching the city below, thinking about Kyle and where he'd gone and what kind of business required him to leave with that expression on his face. Around noon, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Hello? Arya Silva. The voice was male, accented, Russian maybe, or Ukrainian. We need to talk. Her blood turned to ice. Who is this? Someone who knows what you're worth. A pause. And what Kyle Draven paid for you. She should hang up, should call Kyle immediately, but her hand wouldn't move. What do you want? To make you an offer, a way out of your current situation. I'm not interested. You haven't heard the offer yet. The voice was smooth, almost friendly. We can extract you, tonight. Disappear you somewhere Draven will never find you. All we ask in return is a little information. What kind of information? His routines, his security protocols, the layout of his properties. The man chuckled. Small things. Details he probably doesn't even discuss with you, but valuable nonetheless. Arya's stomach turned. You want me to betray him. We want to offer you freedom. What you do with it is your choice. She laughed, the sound harsh and brittle. And when he comes looking for me, which he will, what happens to whoever's hiding me? That's our problem, not yours. No. She said it firmly, surprised by her own certainty. I'm not interested. Lose this number. She hung up before he could respond, her hands shaking. The phone rang again immediately, same number. She declined the call. It rang again and again. On the fourth attempt, she answered, I said I'm not. You hang up on me again. And the next call you get will be from a morgue identifying your friend Lyanna Park's body. Everything stopped. What? Her voice came out strangled. We know where she lives, where she works, her class schedule, her jogging route through Riverside Park every morning at 6. The man's tone was conversational, almost pleasant. Accidents happen all the time in this city. Would be a shame if she became a statistic. Don't you dare! Then cooperate. One meeting, one conversation, that's all we're asking. Arya's mind raced, panic clawing at her throat. When? Tonight, 9 p.m. The address will be texted to you in 10 minutes. Come alone, or your friend pays the price. The line went dead. Arya stood frozen in the middle of the living room, her phone clutched in her white-knuckled grip. This was bad. This was worse than bad. She should call Kyle, should tell Marcus, should do anything except what these people were asking. But if she told Kyle, if she brought him into this, what would he do? He'd set it himself. He'd tear the city apart to keep her safe. How many people would die in that process? And would Lyanna be one of them, caught in the crossfire? The text came through 8 minutes later. An address in the warehouse district. 9 p.m. Arya stared at it, her pulse hammering, her mind cycling through options and finding none that didn't end in disaster. She had 3 hours to decide whether to trust the devil she knew or the devils she didn't. Sack. At 8:30, Arya stood in front of her closet, pulling on a dark jacket and checking her pockets for the third time. Phone. ID. Nothing else. She felt like she was preparing for her own execution. Marcus was stationed in the hallway outside the penthouse, per usual. She'd have to get past him somehow, get down to the parking garage, find a way out of the building without being seen. It was impossible. She was going to get caught. But the alternative was Lyanna's body in the morgue, and that wasn't an option she could live with. She waited until 8:45, when Marcus took his routine patrol sweep of the floor, then slipped out of the penthouse and headed for the service elevator at the far end of the hall, the one the cleaning staff used, the one that opened directly into the parking sublevel. Her hands shook as she pressed the button. The doors opened. She stepped inside. The elevator descended, and with each floor that passed, Arya's certainty crumbled a little more. This was insane. She was walking into a trap. These people didn't want information. They wanted leverage. They wanted to use her against Kyle, and once they had what they needed, she'd be disposable. But Lyanna... The doors opened on the parking level. Arya stepped out into the fluorescent-lit concrete expanse, looking for an exit, a way to... Going somewhere? She spun. Kale stood 20 feet away, leaning against the hood of the sedan, arms crossed. He looked calm. Too calm. Her heart stopped. How did you... Marcus called me the second you left your room. He pushed off the car, walking toward her slowly, deliberately. Did you really think I wouldn't have cameras in the hallways? Shame and fury warred in her chest. You're spying on me? I'm protecting you. He stopped a few feet away, his expression unreadable. Where were you going, Arya? Out. Try again. She lifted her chin, defiant even as her stomach churned with fear. It's none of your business. Everything about you is my business. His voice dropped, dangerous. You got a call this afternoon. Unknown number. You answered it. What did they want? How did he... Of course. Her phone. He probably had it tapped, monitored, every call and text cataloged. They wanted to talk, she said finally. About what? About me. About you. About making a deal. Kale's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. A subtle tensing, like a predator catching a scent. What kind of deal? They said they could get me out. Hide me somewhere you'd never find me. All I had to do was give them information about your security. And you said? I said no. She swallowed hard. But then they threatened Liana, said if I didn't meet them tonight, she'd end up dead. The temperature in the parking garage seemed to drop 10 degrees. Where? Kyle's voice was soft, lethal. The warehouse district, 9 p.m. She pulled out her phone, showing him the address. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't risk them hurting her. Kale plucked the phone from her hand, reading the message. Then he pulled out his own phone, typing rapidly. Marcus, get a team to this address. Full tactical. I want eyes on the location in 15 minutes. No one goes in until I arrive. He lowered the phone, his attention returning to Arya. You were going to walk into an ambush alone. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. His hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that felt at odds with the fury in his eyes. The choice is to trust me, to come to me when you're threatened, to let me handle it. I can't always run to you. Yes, he said firmly. You can. That's what I'm here for. Tears burned at the back of her throat. They'll kill her. No, they won't. He dropped his hand, stepping back. Because I'm going to kill them first. The certainty in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like relief. 20 minutes later, Arya sat in the back of the sedan as it pulled up 2 blocks from the warehouse address. Kyle had tried to make her stay at the penthouse, but she'd refused. This was her fault. Her mistake. She needed to see it through. You stay in the car, Kale said, checking the gun holstered at his side. No matter what happens, you stay here. Understood? What if... No exceptions, Arya. His eyes locked onto hers, hard and unyielding. I can't focus on the threat if I'm worried about you doing something reckless. So you stay. You wait. And when this is over, we'll talk about what happens next. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Kyle leaned in, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought he might kiss her. But he just pressed his forehead to hers, brief and grounding, then pulled away and stepped out of the car. Through the tinted windows, Arya watched him disappear into the shadows, flanked by 3 of his men. The street was quiet, deserted, just a few scattered streetlights casting weak pools of illumination. Minutes ticked by. Then, in the distance, gunfire, sharp cracks that echoed off the buildings, followed by shouting. Arya's hands clenched in her lap, her whole body tense, straining to see what was happening. More shots, a scream, cut off abruptly. Then silence. Arya's breath came in shallow gasps. She reached for the door handle, her hand trembling. She should stay. She'd promised. But what if Kyle was hurt? What if he needed... The door on the opposite side of the car opened. Arya's head whipped around. A man slid into the seat beside her. Not Kyle, someone else. Someone with cold eyes and a gun pointed directly at her chest. Hello, Arya, he said in that accented voice from the phone. Let's go for a ride. Before she could scream, before she could move, he grabbed her arm and hauled her out of the car, into the night, into the waiting darkness of a van parked at the curb. The doors slammed shut. The engine roared to life. And Arya Silva, for the second time in her life, was taken. The van smelled like rust and gasoline and something sour that made Arya's stomach turn. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back, the plastic cutting into her wrists every time the vehicle hit a pothole. The man with the accented voice sat across from her, gun resting casually on his knee, his expression almost bored. "Comfortable?" he asked. Arya didn't answer. Her mind was racing, cycling through every possible outcome, every scenario, and finding nothing but dead ends. Kael would come for her. He had to. But how long would it take? And what would these people do to her in the meantime? The van made a sharp turn, throwing her sideways. She caught herself against the metal wall with her shoulder, pain flaring hot and bright. "Careful," the man said mildly. "We need you intact." "For what?" "For leverage, obviously." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Kael Draven doesn't negotiate for just anyone. But for you, we're betting he'll make an exception." "You don't know him, don't I?" The man smiled, thin and cold. "I know he paid $3 million to settle your father's debts. I know he's kept you locked up in his penthouse like a princess in a tower. I know he tore apart a classroom because some professor got too friendly." His eyes glittered. "That's not business. That's obsession. And obsession makes men stupid." Arya's pulse hammered in her throat. "He'll kill you for this." "Maybe, but first he'll have to find us." The van slowed, then stopped. The back doors opened, revealing a dimly lit loading dock. Two more men stood waiting, both armed, both watching her with the kind of detached interest people reserve for livestock. The accented man grabbed her arm, hauling her out of the van. Her legs buckled, cramped from the ride, but he held her upright, dragging her toward a rusted metal door. Inside was a warehouse, vast and echoing, filled with crates and shadows. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in sickly yellow. In the center of the space, someone had set up a chair, metal, bolted to the floor, and beside it, a folding table with a laptop and what looked like a camera on a tripod. Arya's stomach dropped. "No," she said, twisting against the man's grip. "No, don't. Relax." He shoved her into the chair, and one of the other men zip-tied her ankles to the legs. "We're not going to hurt you, not yet anyway. This is just insurance." The laptop screen flickered to life, and the camera's red recording light blinked on. The accented man positioned himself behind her, one hand on her shoulder. "Smile for Draven, sweetheart. Let's show him what happens when he plays games he can't win." Arya kept her mouth shut, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. She stared directly into the camera, refusing to look afraid, refusing to give them anything. The man laughed. "Defiant. I like that. Let's see how long it lasts." He moved out of frame, and for a moment there was only silence and the hum of machinery. Then her phone, her actual phone, the one Kael had taken from her in the parking garage, appeared in front of the camera. The man held it up, showing the screen. "We have something of yours, Draven," he said to the camera, "and we're willing to trade. 5 million, wired to the account, will provide. You have 6 hours. After that, we start sending pieces." He ended the recording, tapping a few buttons, then looked at Arya with something like satisfaction. "Now we wait." Keats. The first hour was the worst. Arya sat in the chair, her circulation slowly cutting off in her hands and feet, her mind working overtime to find a way out. The warehouse was huge, but the exits were guarded. Even if she could free herself, which seemed impossible with the industrial-strength zip ties, she wouldn't make it 10 feet before someone grabbed her. The men talked among themselves in a language she didn't understand. Russian, she was pretty sure now, occasionally glancing her way but mostly ignoring her. One of them smoked, the acrid smell making her eyes water. Another scrolled through his phone, laughing at something on the screen. They weren't worried. They thought they'd won. Maybe they had. Around the 90-minute mark, the accented man's phone rang. He answered in English, his expression shifting from casual to alert. "Yes. Yes, we have her." A pause. 5 million, non-negotiable. Another pause, longer this time. "Then I guess you'll be getting a package in the mail." He hung up, then looked at Arya with something that might have been pity. "Your boyfriend's trying to negotiate. Offered 2 million. Insults me, honestly." Arya's heart lurched. "He'll pay. Just give him time." "Time's the one thing we're not giving him." The man checked his watch. 4.5 hours left. Better hope he's more motivated than he sounds. But Arya knew Kael, knew the way his mind worked. He wasn't stalling because he didn't care. He was stalling because he was hunting. Right now, somewhere in the city, He was tearing through every contact, every resource, every scrap of information to find her. She just had to survive long enough for him to get here. Yet, 2 hours in, one of the guards brought her water. She drank it greedily, her throat raw and dry, and tried not to think about what would happen when the deadline passed. The warehouse was cold. Her jacket wasn't enough to keep out the chill that seeped up from the concrete floor, and she'd started shivering, her muscles cramping from staying in one position too long. "Uncomfortable?" the accented man asked, appearing beside her with a cigarette dangling from his lips. "What do you think?" He shrugged. "Could be worse. We could be doing this the old-fashioned way. Pliers, blowtorch, the works." He took a drag, exhaling smoke toward the ceiling. "But Draven's sentimental about you. Damaged goods aren't worth as much." "You're not going to get your money," Arya said, forcing her voice steady. "You know that, right? He doesn't respond well to threats. Everyone responds to the right threat." The man crouched in front of her, studying her face. "You're pretty. I can see why he's obsessed. But you're not that special. No one is." "Then why go through all this trouble?" "Because he made it personal." The man's expression hardened. 6 months ago, Draven wiped out one of our operations, killed 15 of our people, took our territory, and when we asked for a meeting to discuss terms, he sent us their heads in a box. He leaned closer. "So yeah, it's personal." Arya's blood went cold. She'd known Kyle was dangerous, had seen glimpses of the violence he was capable of, but this was different. This was calculated brutality, the kind of message that started wars. "He must have had a reason," she said quietly. "Does it matter?" The man stood, flicking ash onto the floor. "Reasons don't bring back the dead. But revenge? Revenge is something I can work with." He walked away, and Arya was left alone with the terrible knowledge that this wasn't about money at all. It never had been. This was about making Kyle suffer, and she was the weapon they'd chosen to do it. Nant. 3 hours in, the laptop on the table chimed. The accented man crossed to it, reading something on the screen. His expression darkened. "What?" one of the other men asked in heavily accented English. "He's still negotiating. Says he needs proof she's alive." "So give it to him." The man looked at Arya, then back at the screen. "He wants a live feed, video call." "No way. He'll trace it." "He's already tracing it. We're on borrowed time anyway." The man made a decision, tapping keys. Might as well twist the knife. The laptop screen shifted, and suddenly Kyle's face filled the display. Sharp, furious, and barely contained. The camera on the tripod swiveled toward Arya. "Here's your proof," the accented man said, stepping into frame. "Alive and unharmed. For now." Kale's eyes found Arya, and something in his expression cracked, just for a second, a flash of raw fear before the mask slammed back into place. "Let her go," he said, his voice low and deadly. "This is between you and me." "Exactly, which is why she's perfect leverage." "I'll give you the 5 million. I'll give you 10. Just let her go." The man laughed. "You think this is about money? You killed my brother, Draven. You sent him back to me in pieces. So now I'm going to take something from you, something you actually care about." Kale's jaw worked. "Touch her, and I'll make what I did to your brother look like mercy." Big words from a man who can't even find us. The man's hand landed on Arya's shoulder, squeezing. "Say goodbye, Arya. Let him hear your voice one last time." "Don't," Kyle said sharply. "Don't say anything. Don't give him—" "I'm okay," Arya said, cutting him off. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. "I'm okay, Kale. Don't do anything stupid. I'm going to find you." Kale's eyes burned into hers through the screen. "I'm going to get you out of there. Just hold on." "Touching," the man said and closed the laptop. The connection severed. Arya's breath came in ragged gasps, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. She'd seen Kyle's face, had heard the promise in his voice, and it had given her something to hold on to, a fragile thread of hope in the darkness. But as the minutes ticked by and the deadline crept closer, that hope began to fray. 4 hours in, the guards started getting restless. They checked their weapons, muttered among themselves, glanced at the exits like they expected Kyle to come crashing through at any moment. Maybe he would. Maybe he wouldn't make it in time. The accented man paced near the laptop, checking his watch every few minutes. 1 hour left. Still no wire transfer. Maybe he doesn't have the money, one of the others suggested. He has it. He's stalling. The man turned to Arya. You better hope he stops stalling soon. Arya didn't respond. Her wrists were numb now, her hands tingling with pins and needles. Her back ached from sitting upright for so long. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the gnawing dread in her gut. Something was wrong. Kale should have found her by now. Should have stormed in with his men and ended this. But the warehouse remained quiet, undisturbed, and with every passing minute the wrongness grew. Then, at the 4.5-hour mark, the warehouse's main door exploded inward. Not kicked open, not breached. Exploded. A deafening blast that sent chunks of metal and concrete flying, that filled the air with smoke and dust and the acrid smell of explosives. Gunfire erupted. The guards scattered, returning fire toward the entrance, toward the figures moving through the smoke. Dark shapes, fast and efficient. The accented man grabbed Arya's chair, tipping it backward, using her as a shield. She hit the ground hard, her head cracking against the concrete, stars bursting behind her eyes. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard shouting, more gunfire. A scream, cut short. Then silence. Footsteps approached, measured, deliberate. The chair was hauled upright. Kale stood in front of her, gun in hand, his suit splattered with blood that wasn't his. Behind him, 3 of his men secured the warehouse, checking bodies, clearing corners. Arya. His voice was rough, strained. He holstered the gun and pulled a knife from his belt, slicing through the zip ties with quick, efficient movements. The second her hands were free, Arya launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck, burying her face against his shoulder. She was shaking, couldn't stop shaking, and his arms came around her, solid and grounding. I've got you, he murmured against her hair. I've got you. You're safe. But even as he said it, even as his hand smoothed down her back, Arya felt the wrongness settling deeper into her bones. This had been too easy. She pulled back, looking up at him. How did you find me? Trace the video call. They weren't careful enough. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? No, I'm... She stopped, her mind catching on something. They said you were negotiating, that you offered $2 million. I was stalling, buying time to get a location. But they wanted 5. You could have just paid it. Kale's expression shuddered. It wasn't about the money. Then what was it about? Before he could answer, one of his men called out from across the warehouse. Boss, you need to see this. Kael's hand tightened on Arya's arm briefly. Then he released her, moving toward where the man stood beside the laptop. Arya followed, her legs unsteady. The screen showed an email, not to Kael, but from him, or at least from his account. Time-stamped 3 hours ago. From k.draven@draven-enterprises.com. To encrypted address. Subject. Confirmation. Transfer complete. $2 million as discussed. She's all yours. Arya's world tilted. That's not from me, Kael said immediately, his voice hard. Someone hacked my account, spoofed the address. But the man operating the laptop shook his head, tapping keys. It came from your personal server, 2-factor authentication, biometric verification. He looked up, his expression grim. This was sent from inside your network, boss, someone with access. The warehouse fell silent. Kael stared at the screen, his jaw tight, something dark and terrible crossing his features. What does this mean? Arya asked, her voice small. Kael didn't answer. He was already moving, pulling out his phone, barking orders to someone on the other end. Lock down the building. No one in or out. I want everyone in the conference room in 20 minutes. Everyone. He ended the call, then turned to Arya. We're leaving. Now. Kael, what? Someone sold you out. His eyes were ice. Someone inside my organization set this up. And I'm going to find out who. The drive back to the city was tense and silent. Kael sat beside Arya in the back of the sedan, his phone in his hand, his expression carved from stone. She could see the rage simmering beneath his controlled exterior, could feel the violence coiled in his frame like a spring wound too tight. It wasn't real, she said finally. The kidnapping. It was a setup. It was real enough, Kael's voice was clipped. They would have killed you if I hadn't gotten there in time, but someone on your side arranged it. Yes. Why? That's what I'm going to find out. The sedan pulled into the underground garage of Kael's headquarters, a sleek glass tower in the financial district. Arya had never been here before, had never seen this side of his empire. They rode the elevator to the top floor in silence. The conference room was already full when they arrived. A dozen men in expensive suits, all of them standing when Kyle entered. Arya recognized a few faces from the penthouse, from brief encounters in the hallway. Marcus was there, his expression carefully neutral. Kyle didn't sit. He moved to the head of the table, his hands braced on the polished surface, his gaze sweeping across each face. "Someone in this room betrayed me," he said quietly. The tension ratcheted up 10 notches. Someone in this room sold out Arya Silva to Viktor Volkov's crew. Someone in this room sent an email from my personal account authorizing a $2 million payment for her abduction. His voice dropped, lethal. And someone in this room is going to tell me who, right now. Silence. No one moved, no one spoke. Kale's smile was razor thin. No volunteers? Fine. We'll do this the hard way. He nodded to Marcus, who moved to the door, locking it from the inside. No one leaves until I have answers, Kyle said. I don't care how long it takes. One of the men, older, gray-haired, with the bearing of someone who'd been in the organization for decades, cleared his throat. With respect, sir, accusing your inner circle without evidence is evidence. Kale pulled out his phone, tapping the screen. A projection appeared on the wall. The email, the transfer confirmation, server log showing the exact timestamp and IP address. The email came from inside this building, from a terminal with executive clearance. Only 12 people have that access. His eyes swept the room again. And all 12 are standing in this room. The gray-haired man's expression tightened. Then check the logs. See who was logged in at that time. I did. Kale's voice was soft, dangerous. The terminal belonged to you, Richard. Every eye in the room turned to the gray-haired man. Richard's face went pale. That's impossible. I was in meetings all afternoon. I never touched... Your biometric signature authorized the login, Kyle interrupted. Your fingerprints. Your retinal scan. So either you sent the email or you gave someone access to your credentials. I didn't. Richard's voice rose, panicked. I swear to God, Kale, I had nothing to do with this. Someone must have cloned my access, hacked the system. I would never... Kale moved so fast, Arya barely saw it. 1 second, he was at the head of the table. The next, he had Richard slammed against the wall, forearm across his throat. Don't lie to me, Kyle said softly. I've known you for 15 years. I trusted you with everything, so don't stand here and lie to my face. Richard wheezed, clawing at Kale's arm. Not lying. Then who? I don't know. Kale released him, and Richard collapsed to the floor, gasping. The room was dead silent. Arya stood near the door, her pulse hammering, watching this unfold like a car crash in slow motion. This was the world Kyle inhabited. This was the reality she'd been pulled into. Violence and suspicion and loyalty measured in blood. Someone talk, Kyle said, his voice carrying across the room. Or I start breaking fingers until someone does. One of the younger men, barely 30, with nervous energy radiating off him, stepped forward. It might not have been internal. Kyle's head turned. Explain. Volkov's crew, they're good. Really good. If they wanted access to your servers, they could have gotten it. Social engineering, phishing, physical infiltration. He swallowed hard. There's been a maintenance worker in the building for the past 2 weeks. New hire, Eastern European. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but what? Kale's voice was deadly calm. But he had access to the executive floor, to the server room. If he planted something, a keylogger, a backdoor, he could have cloned Richard's credentials without Richard ever knowing. Kale stared at him for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone again, dialing. Security, pull the records for all maintenance personnel hired in the last month. Send me everything. Employment history, background checks, security footage. I want it in 5 minutes. He ended the call. 3 minutes later, his phone buzzed. He read the screen, his expression darkening. The maintenance worker quit yesterday, he said flatly. No notice, just stopped showing up. Because he got what he needed, the younger man said. Access, credentials, a way to set up the kidnapping and make it look like you authorized it. Kale's hands clenched into fists. Find him. I want his real name, his location, and everyone he's ever worked for. And I want it before sunrise. The men scattered, pulling out phones, already making calls. Kyle turned to Arya,
who'd been standing frozen through the entire exchange. "Come on, we're leaving." She followed him out of the conference room, into the elevator, down to the garage. Neither of them spoke until they were back in the sedan, pulling out onto the empty street. "I'm sorry," Kyle said finally. Arya blinked, startled. "For what?" "For putting you at this position. For making you a target." His jaw worked. "This is my world. My war. You shouldn't be caught in the crossfire." "I didn't have a choice," Arya said quietly. "Remember? I was traded into this." "I know." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was staggering. "But I should have protected you better, should have seen this coming. You saved me." "Barely." His voice cracked on the word. "If we'd been 5 minutes later, if they'd decided to move up the timeline, but they didn't. I'm here. I'm alive. This time." He turned away, staring out the window. "But there will be a next time, and the time after that. As long as you're with me, you're a target. That's not going to change." Something cold settled in Arya's stomach. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe they were right. Maybe the best thing I can do for you is let you go." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Let me go," she repeated slowly. "Get you out of the city. New identity. New life. Somewhere they'll never find you." His hands were clenched in his lap. "Somewhere I'll never find you." Arya's breath caught. A week ago, she would have leapt at this offer, would have run and never looked back. But now, sitting beside him in the back of the sedan, staring at his profile, at the exhaustion and guilt and something deeper that he was trying desperately to hide, she realized something terrifying. She didn't want to leave. "No," she said. Kale's head turned sharply. "What?" I said no. Her voice was steady now, certain. "I'm not running, I'm not hiding, and I'm sure as hell not letting you make this decision for me." "Arya, you don't get to do this." She shifted in her seat, facing him fully. "You don't get to keep me locked up like I'm yours, protect me like I matter, tear apart a warehouse to get me back, and then turn around and ship me off because it's convenient. It's not about convenience. It's about keeping you alive. I'm alive because of you." The words burst out of her, raw and desperate. "I'm alive because you came for me. Because you didn't negotiate, didn't stall. You just showed up. Like you said you would." Kale stared at her, something breaking in his expression. "So don't ask me to leave," Arya continued, her voice dropping. "Don't ask me to walk away from whatever this is. Because I can't. I've tried. I've spent weeks hating you, resisting you, fighting you, and I still—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "You still what?" Kael's voice was barely a whisper. Arya took a shaky breath. "I still want to stay." The silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Then Kael moved. His hand came up, cupping the back of her neck, pulling her toward him. His mouth crashed into hers, desperate, consuming, months of tension and restraint shattering in a single moment. Arya gasped against his lips, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss was messy, urgent, nothing like the controlled precision she'd come to expect from him. This was raw need, stripped of pretense, and it burned through her like wildfire. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kael rested his forehead against hers. "You're making a mistake," he said roughly. "Probably." Arya's fingers traced the line of his jaw. "But it's my mistake to make." His eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for hesitation. When he found none, something in him surrendered. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay. You stay." "I stay," she confirmed. And in that moment, in the back of a car speeding through the city night, Arya Silva made a choice that would change everything. She chose the monster. She chose the cage. She chose him. And there was no going back. The kiss changed everything. Not in some grand, sweeping way that movies promised. It changed things in small, dangerous increments. The way Kael's hand lingered at the small of Arya's back when they entered the penthouse. The way she didn't pull away when his fingers brushed hers in passing. The way the air between them crackled with something electric and inevitable. They didn't talk about it, didn't dissect it, or define it. They just existed in this new reality where the line between captor and captive had blurred beyond recognition, where the cage had become something neither of them wanted to escape. But the world outside didn't care about their fragile understanding.
2 days after the warehouse, Kael's phone rang at 3 in the morning. Arya woke to the sound of his voice, low, sharp, dangerous, coming from the living room. She pulled on a robe and padded out to find him standing by the windows, phone pressed to his ear, his other hand braced against the glass. When? A pause. How many? Another pause, longer this time. His shoulders tensed. Lock it down. No one gets in or out. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call, standing motionless for a moment, staring out at the city lights. What happened? Arya asked. Kael turned, and the expression on his face made her blood run cold. They hit one of my warehouses, south side. 4 of my men are dead. Volkov? Who else? He moved past her, heading for the bedroom. I have to go. Marcus will stay with you. Wait. Arya followed him, watching as he pulled on clothes with efficient, controlled movements. What are you going to do? What I should have done weeks ago. He buckled his belt, checked the gun holstered at his side. End this. Kael. He crossed to her, cupping her face in both hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. Stay here. Stay safe. I'll be back before morning. Then he kissed her, hard, bruising, like he was trying to memorize the shape of her mouth, and was gone. Arya stood in the empty bedroom, her heart pounding, the taste of him still on her lips. She had a bad feeling about this. Vague. 6 hours passed. Arya paced the penthouse, Marcus a silent presence by the door, her phone clutched in her hand even though Kael hadn't called, hadn't texted, had given her nothing but silence that grew more ominous with every passing minute. At 9 a.m., her phone finally rang. Not Kael. An unknown number. She answered anyway. Hello? Arya Silva. The voice was familiar, accented, cold, the same voice from the warehouse. Victor Volkov. We need to talk. Her hand tightened on the phone. I have nothing to say to you. Then listen, your boyfriend just walked into a trap. Right now, as we speak, he's pinned down in a building on the south side with half my men surrounding him. He has maybe an hour before they breach his position and kill everyone inside. Arya's stomach dropped. You're lying. Am I? Call him. See if he answers. Volkov's voice was almost pleasant. Or better yet, turn on the news, Channel 7. They're covering it as a gang-related incident. Very dramatic. With shaking hands, Arya grabbed the remote and switched on the television. Channel 7 showed aerial footage of a warehouse district, smoke rising from one building, police barriers cordoning off the streets, the unmistakable pop of gunfire in the background. Breaking news this morning as what appears to be a gang war erupts on the city's south side, the reporter was saying. Police have evacuated the area and are urging residents to stay indoors. No word yet on casualties, but sources say multiple people are trapped inside the main structure. Arya muted it, her heart hammering. What do you want? A trade, Volkov said simply. You for him. You walk in, he walks out. Clean. Simple. He'll never agree to that. He doesn't have to. This is between you and me. A pause. I know you can get past his guard. I know Marcus answers to Draven, not you, but I also know you're resourceful. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave that penthouse. You're going to come to the address I'm about to send you, and you're going to do it in the next 30 minutes, or I give the order to storm that building and put a bullet in Kael Draven's head. How do I know you won't kill us both? You don't. Volkov sounded amused. But what choice do you have? The line went dead. A text came through seconds later. An address. A countdown timer. 29 minutes, 58 seconds. Arya stared at the screen, her mind racing. This was insane. This was suicide. Kael would be furious, would probably kill her himself for even considering it. But the alternative was watching him die. She looked at Marcus, still stationed by the door, his expression unreadable. I need to use the bathroom, she said. He nodded, not moving. Arya walked down the hall, into the guest bathroom, and locked the door. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone, typing quickly. Arya, I'm coming for you. Don't do anything stupid. She didn't wait for a response, just pocketed the phone, opened the bathroom window, 3 stories up, fire escape directly below, and climbed out. Shatak. The address Volkov had sent led to an abandoned factory in the industrial district, all rusted metal and broken windows, graffiti covering every surface. Arya approached on foot, having ditched the cab 6 blocks away. her pulse thundering in her ears. This was a trap. Obviously a trap. But she was walking into it anyway. The factory's main entrance was open, the door hanging off its hinges. Inside, the space was cavernous and dark, shafts of dusty sunlight filtering through holes in the roof. "Hello?" Her voice echoed. "Right on time." Volkov stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, flanked by two armed men. He was older than she'd expected, mid-50s, gray at the temples, with the kind of cold, calculating eyes that had seen too much violence. "I appreciate punctuality." Arya stopped 20 feet away, her hands raised slightly. "I'm here. Now let Kyle go." "Not quite yet." Volkov gestured, and one of his men pulled out a phone, dialing. He spoke in rapid Russian, then nodded to Volkov. "They're standing down. Draven and his men are being allowed to leave." "How do I know you're telling the truth?" "You don't." Volkov smiled thinly. "But I'm a man of my word. I wanted Draven to suffer, and what better way than taking from him the one thing he values most?" His eyes raked over her. "You should be flattered. He's built an empire on ruthlessness, and yet here you are, his one weakness." Arya's stomach turned. "So what happens now?" "Now we wait. Once I receive confirmation that my men have cleared the area and Draven is gone, you and I are going to have a conversation about the future." "What future? You're going to kill me anyway." "Maybe. Maybe not." Volkov moved closer, circling her like a predator. "You're more useful alive than dead. Draven will come for you. Of course he will. And when he does, we'll be ready. This time, there won't be any last-minute rescues." Arya's mind worked frantically. She needed to stall, needed to buy time for what? For Kyle to figure out where she was? For some miracle escape route to present itself? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Volkov's expression sharpened. "Give me the phone." "It's probably just now." She pulled it out slowly. The screen showed a message from Kyle. "Kyle, where the fuck are you?" Volkov plucked the phone from her hand, reading the message. His smile widened. "Perfect. Let's tell him, shall we?" He typed quickly, then showed her the screen. "Arya, Old Factory, Industrial District, East Side. Come alone or I die." He hit send. Arya's blood turned to ice. "You said you'd let him go." "I said my men would stand down. I never said I wouldn't use you as bait." Volkov pocketed her phone. "He'll come. He won't be able to help himself. And this time, I'll be ready." "You're insane." "I'm pragmatic." He turned to his men, issuing orders in Russian. They moved to positions around the factory, high ground, cover points, fields of fire that would turn the space into a killing zone. Arya was marched to the center of the room and shoved into a metal chair. One of the men zip-tied her wrists behind her back, then her ankles to the chair legs. "Comfortable?" Volkov asked. She didn't answer. He crouched in front of her, his expression almost sympathetic. "For what it's worth, I don't enjoy this. You seem like a smart girl. Wrong place, wrong time. But Draven killed my brother, took everything I built, so you understand this isn't personal." "It feels pretty fucking personal from where I'm sitting." Volkov chuckled. "Fair enough." He stood, checking his watch. "He'll be here in 20 minutes, give or take. Try to relax, make peace with whatever you believe in. It'll be over soon." He walked away, disappearing into the shadows at the far end of the factory. Arya sat alone, surrounded by armed men, waiting for Kyle to walk into a death trap. And it was all her fault. 18 minutes later, she heard it. The distant roar of an engine, growing louder, closer. The men around the factory tensed, raising their weapons, sighting down barrels. Volkov reappeared, moving to stand behind Arya's chair, one hand resting on her shoulder. "Showtime." A black SUV crashed through the factory's side entrance, metal screaming as it plowed through the corrugated wall. It skidded to a stop in a spray of gravel and dust, driver's door already opening. Kyle stepped out. He was alone. No backup. No tactical team. Just him, a gun in each hand, his expression carved from pure rage. "Let her go," he called out, his voice echoing through the factory. "Put down your weapons first," Volkov called back. "Not happening." "Then we're at an impasse." Volkov's hand tightened on Arya's shoulder. "I have 12 men with guns pointed at you right now. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. So lower your weapons, or I paint the walls with her brain matter." Kael's eyes found Arya's across the distance. Something passed between them. Regret, maybe, or resignation.
Then he lowered the guns, setting them on the ground. Kick them away. He did. Now walk forward, slowly. Hands where I can see them. Kale moved forward, his hands raised, his gaze never leaving Arya. With every step, she could see the calculation in his eyes, the way he was mapping the space, counting the men, looking for angles. Far enough, Volkov said, when Kyle was 20 feet away. Kneel! No. Kneel, or I shoot her right now. Kyle's jaw worked. Then, slowly, he lowered himself to his knees on the concrete. Volkov smiled. There. That wasn't so hard, was it? He moved around Arya's chair, closing the distance to Kyle. I've waited a long time for this. Dreamed about it, actually. The great Kyle Draven, brought low. Get it over with, Kyle said flatly. Oh, I will. But first... Volkov pulled out a knife, the blade glinting in the dusty light. First, I want you to watch. He turned back toward Arya. Everything happened at once. Kyle's hand shot to his ankle, pulling a backup gun from a concealed holster. He fired twice, both shots hitting the men closest to him, center mass, dropping them instantly. Volkov spun, bringing the knife up, but Kyle was already moving, rolling sideways as gunfire erupted from the catwalks above. Bullets sparked off the concrete where he'd been kneeling a second before. Arya screamed, jerking against the zip ties, the chair tipping dangerously. Kale came up firing, his shots precise and devastating. Another man fell, then another. Volkov dove for cover behind a concrete pillar, shouting orders in Russian. The factory exploded into chaos, gunfire echoing off metal walls, ricochets whining through the air, men shouting and dying. Kyle moved through it like a force of nature, every motion economical, brutal. He took cover behind a rusted machine, reloading, then popped up to fire again. One of Volkov's men tried to flank him. Kyle caught the movement, pivoted, and put 2 rounds through the man's chest. But there were too many. Even as Kyle dropped them one by one, more bullets found their way closer, sparking off the metal near his head, tearing chunks out of the concrete cover. He was going to die. They were both going to die. Then, impossibly, the odds shifted. The factory's west wall exploded inward. Not a vehicle this time, but breaching charges, the blast deafening. Through the smoke and dust, figures poured in. Kyle's men, heavily armed, moving with tactical precision. Marcus led the charge, his face set in grim determination. The firefight intensified, but now Volkov's men were caught in a crossfire, pinned between Kyle's position and the new arrivals. It was a massacre. Within 2 minutes, the shooting stopped. Bodies littered the factory floor. The air stank of cordite and blood. Kale stood, his suit torn and bloodied, and looked directly at Marcus. How did you? She left the window open, Marcus said simply. Wasn't hard to figure out where she went after that. Kale's eyes closed briefly, something like relief washing over his features. Then he was moving, crossing to where Arya sat in the chair, still zip-tied, her whole body shaking. I've got you, he said roughly, pulling out a knife and cutting through the restraints. I've got you. The second her hands were free, Arya grabbed him, pulling him down into a desperate kiss, tasting blood and smoke and survival. When they broke apart, she was crying. You came alone. You walked into a trap alone. You could have... I know. His forehead pressed against hers. I know, but I couldn't risk you. Couldn't risk them using backup as an excuse to hurt you. You're an idiot. Probably. He pulled back, cupping her face. But I'm your idiot. A sound made them both turn. Volkov was still alive, slumped against the far wall, blood spreading across his chest from a wound high on his right side. His gun lay several feet away, out of reach. Kyle stood, pulling Arya to her feet, keeping her behind him as he approached. Marcus and the other men formed a loose perimeter, weapons ready. Kale stopped a few feet from Volkov, staring down at the man who'd tried to destroy him. Finish it, Volkov wheezed, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Get it over with. Kyle pulled his gun, checked the chamber, then aimed it at Volkov's head. His finger tightened on the trigger, then stopped. No, he said quietly. Volkov's eyes widened. What? I'm not going to kill you. Kale lowered the gun. You're going to live, and you're going to spend every remaining day of your miserable life knowing that you lost, that you had me, had her, had everything lined up perfectly, and you still lost. That's not mercy. Volkov coughed, blood flecking his lips. That's worse than death.
I know. Kale's smile was cold. That's the point. He turned to Marcus. Call an ambulance. Make sure he survives long enough to face charges. Attempted murder, kidnapping, weapons trafficking. By the time the DA's done with him, he'll die in a cell. You can't. Volkov tried to push himself up, then collapsed back, gasping. You think the system will hold me? I have lawyers, connections. I'll be out in... You'll be out never, Kael interrupted, because every judge, every prosecutor, every cop in this city knows what you did, knows you targeted a civilian, knows you started a war in broad daylight. His voice dropped. And they know I'm the reason you're still breathing. So no, Victor, you won't be getting out. You'll just be getting older. He walked away, returning to Arya, leaving Volkov bleeding and broken on the factory floor. The aftermath was a blur of sirens and statements, police and paramedics. Kael made calls, pulled strings, ensured the narrative was clean, self-defense, protection of an innocent, Volkov as the aggressor. By the time the sun set, the story was already being spun in Kael's favor. They returned to the penthouse as night fell, both exhausted, both running on adrenaline fumes. Arya went straight to the shower, standing under the scalding water until her skin turned pink, washing away the blood and smoke and terror. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel, she found Kael in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. Hey, she said softly. He looked up, and the expression on his face gutted her. You left. You walked out. You went to him. I had to. No, you didn't. He stood, crossing to her. You could have waited, could have trusted me to handle it. He said he'd kill you if I didn't come. And I would have handled it. His voice rose, frustration and fear bleeding through. I always handle it, that's what I do. But you just walked into a death trap without backup, without a plan, without... He cut himself off, running a hand through his hair. Do you have any idea what it did to me? Realizing you were gone? Getting that text and knowing you were with him? I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't cut it. He grabbed her shoulders, not hard, but firm. You don't get to throw yourself into danger like that. You don't get to trade yourself for me. That's not how this works. Then how does it work? Arya shot back, her own fear manifesting as anger. You get to storm into warehouses alone, but I have to sit in a cage and wait? You get to risk everything, but I'm just supposed to, what? Watch? Yes, that's not fair. I don't care about fair. His hand slid from her shoulders to cup her face, desperate. I care about you breathing. I care about you alive. Everything else is negotiable. Arya stared at him, seeing the truth written in every line of his face. This wasn't about control. It was about terror, the bone-deep fear of losing her. I'm alive, she said quietly. We're both alive. That's what matters. This time. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. But what about next time? What about the next Viktor Volkov? The next threat? The next... She kissed him, hard, desperate, pouring everything she couldn't say into the press of her mouth against his. Kael froze for a heartbeat. Then he was kissing her back, his hands tangling in her wet hair, pulling her closer. The towel fell away, forgotten, and Arya didn't care. Didn't care about anything except the feel of him against her, solid and real and alive. They stumbled backward toward the bed, still kissing, hands roaming, relearning every contour. When the back of Kael's knees hit the mattress, he sat, pulling her into his lap so she straddled him. We shouldn't, he murmured against her mouth, even as his hand slid down her bare back. You've been through... You need to rest. I need you. Arya's fingers worked at the buttons of his shirt, shoving it off his shoulders. I need to feel something besides fear. Please. Something in him broke. His mouth found hers again, hungry and demanding, and this time there was no hesitation. Just need. Just the desperate affirmation of survival, of choosing each other in a world that had tried to tear them apart. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Arya's head on Kael's chest, his arm wrapped around her shoulders. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. The war was over. Volkov was in custody. The threats had been neutralized. But as Arya drifted toward sleep, listening to the steady rhythm of Kael's heartbeat, she knew this was just the beginning. They'd crossed a line today, both of them. Had made choices that couldn't be unmade. She'd walked willingly into his world, had chosen his darkness, had bound herself to him in ways that went deeper than contracts or transactions. And Kael Kale had shown her the full extent of what he was willing to do to keep her. The violence he'd unleash, the empire he'd burn. They were bound now. Truly bound. Not by her father's debt or Kael's deal. By choice. By blood. By the undeniable truth that they'd rather face hell together than heaven apart. Outside the penthouse windows, the city glittered. Millions of lights, millions of lives, all of them untouched by the war that had raged in the shadows. But Arya and Kyle had been touched, had been changed, and there was no going back to who they'd been before. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats. The world wouldn't stop spinning just because they'd found each other. But tonight, wrapped in darkness and each other, they could pretend otherwise. Tonight, they could just be two people who'd survived. Two people who'd chosen each other against all odds. Two people who'd found something worth fighting for in the wreckage of a transaction that was supposed to be cold and clean. Arya's eyes drifted closed, Kael's warmth surrounding her, his breathing evening out as he fell into sleep. She'd started this journey as a prisoner, a bargaining chip, a Silva asset traded to end a war. But she was ending it as something else entirely, as Kyle Draven's equal, his partner, his obsession. And though neither of them had said the word yet, though it hung unspoken in the air between them, his love. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. The morning after the factory came quiet and strange, like the world had forgotten how to make noise. Arya woke to sunlight streaming through the penthouse windows, and Kael's arm draped across her waist, his breathing deep and even against her shoulder. For a moment, just one perfect, suspended moment, everything felt normal. Safe. Right. Then reality crashed back in. Her body ached in places she hadn't known could ache. Her wrists bore faint bruises from the zip ties. When she shifted, trying not to wake Kael, her muscles protested, reminding her of yesterday's violence in sharp, insistent detail. Kael's eyes opened, immediately alert. "You okay?" "Sore," she admitted. "But okay." He propped himself up on one elbow, studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. His hand came up, fingers tracing the shadow of a bruise along her jaw, so faint she'd barely noticed it herself. "I should have gotten there sooner," he said quietly. "You got there exactly when you needed to." Arya caught his hand, pressing it against her cheek. "We're alive. That's what matters." "Is it?" Something dark flickered in his expression. "You almost died yesterday. Because of me. Because of what I am. What I do. I almost died because Viktor Volkov is a psychopath who wanted revenge. And he wanted revenge because I gave him a reason." Kael pulled his hand away, sitting up, the sheets pooling around his waist. "This is my world, Arya. This is what being with me means. Violence, threats, enemies who'll use you to get to me." "I know. Do you?" He turned to face her fully, and the exhaustion in his eyes was staggering. "Because yesterday was just one threat. There will be others. There always are. And I can't—" His voice cracked slightly. "I can't watch you walk into another trap. Can't sit there wondering if this time I won't make it in time." Arya sat up, wrapping the sheet around herself. "So what are you saying? That last night was a mistake?" "No." The word came out fierce, immediate. "Last night was the only thing that's made sense in weeks. But that doesn't change the reality. You deserve better than this. Better than me." "Stop." She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "Stop deciding what I deserve. I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting from every hard truth. I walked into that factory with my eyes open. I chose you knowing exactly what it meant. You chose survival. I chose you," she repeated firmly. "Everything else was just noise." Kyle stared at her, something breaking and reforming behind his eyes. Then he kissed her, soft, achingly gentle, nothing like the desperate collision of the night before. This was different. This was a question and an answer all at once. When they pulled apart, Arya rested her forehead against his. "We're doing this, right? Actually doing this?" "Yeah." His hand found hers, fingers lacing together. "We're doing this. Then no more deciding things for me. No more trying to push me away for my own good. We're in this together, or we're not in it at all." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You drive a hard bargain." "I learned from the best." Hush. The next 3 days were strange and quiet.
Volkov was in custody, his organization dismantled, his men either arrested or scattered. The South Side territories that had been contested for months fell cleanly under Kael's control. The war, as far as anyone could tell, was over. But Arya couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. She returned to campus on the fourth day, Marcus shadowing her as usual, and tried to fall back into the rhythm of normal life. Classes, assignments, conversations with Lyanna, who'd cornered her in the library with a look that said they were going to talk whether Arya wanted to or not. "I thought you were dead," Lyanna said bluntly, dropping into the chair across from Arya. "You disappeared for 3 days, didn't answer texts, didn't show up to class, and then you waltz back in here like nothing happened. I'm sorry, it was family emergency." "Bullshit." Lyanna leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I saw the news, the factory, the shootout, and I saw the footage of you being escorted out by police." Her eyes narrowed. "What the hell is going on with you?" Arya's throat tightened. She'd known this conversation was coming, had dreaded it. "It's complicated. Everything with you is complicated lately." Lyanna's expression softened slightly. "Look, I'm not trying to interrogate you. I'm worried. You're my best friend, and you've been different for weeks, distant, scared. And now you show up with bodyguards and bruises and—" She stopped, her voice catching. "Just tell me you're okay. That's all I need to know." "I'm okay," Arya said, and meant it. I'm better than okay. I know that sounds insane given everything, but I am." Lyanna studied her for a long moment. Then she sighed. "You're in love with him, aren't you, whoever he is?" Arya's breath caught. She hadn't said it out loud, hadn't even fully acknowledged it to herself. But hearing it from someone else made it real, undeniable. "Yeah," she whispered. "I think I am." "Is he good to you?" Arya searched for words. "He's complicated, dangerous, but he'd burn the world down to keep me safe, so yeah, he's good to me." Lyanna reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Then I'm happy for you, terrified, but happy." She paused. "Just promise me something. If it ever stops being good, if he ever hurts you or makes you feel trapped, you'll tell me. You'll let me help." "I promise." It was a promise Arya knew she'd never have to keep. That night, Kael came home late, his expression grim. Arya had been curled up on the couch reading, but she set the book aside the moment she saw his face. "What happened?" "Your father called." He shrugged out of his jacket, tossing it over a chair. "Wants to meet, tomorrow. Says it's important." Arya's stomach dropped. She hadn't spoken to her father since the hangar, hadn't wanted to. The man who'd traded her like currency didn't deserve her time or forgiveness. "What did you say?" "I told him I'd ask you." Kael moved to the bar, pouring 2 fingers of whiskey. "Your call. We can ignore him, or we can hear what he has to say." "What could he possibly have to say that I'd want to hear?" "I don't know." Kael took a drink, his expression unreadable. But he sounded different, desperate maybe, or guilty. Arya stood, pacing to the windows. Below, the city sprawled in all its glittering indifference. "I don't owe him anything." "No, you don't." "He sold me." "He did. So why would I give him the satisfaction of a meeting?" Kael crossed to her, standing close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Because closure matters. Because unfinished business has a way of festering. And because—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because maybe you need to look him in the eye and tell him exactly what he did to you, not for him. For you." Arya turned, searching his face. "You think I should meet him. I think you should do whatever helps you sleep at night." His hand found hers. "But if you decide to meet him, I'll be right there with you." She took a shaky breath. "Okay. Tomorrow. But only if you're there. I wouldn't be anywhere else, but—" They met at a neutral location, a small cafe in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where no one paid attention to anyone else's business. Arya's father was already there when they arrived, sitting at a corner table, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup like he was trying to draw warmth from it. He looked older, thinner. The weight of what he'd done had carved itself into his face in deep, unforgiving lines. He stood when he saw them, his eyes going to Arya with something that might have been hope. "Thank you for coming." Arya didn't respond.
just slid into the chair across from him, Kyle settling beside her, a silent, solid presence. Her father sat back down, his gaze darting between them. You look well. Cut to it, Kyle said flatly. Why are we here? Her father flinched. Then he pulled an envelope from his jacket, sliding it across the table toward Arya. I wanted to give you this. Arya stared at the envelope like it might bite. What is it? The deed to your grandmother's house, the one upstate. It was supposed to be yours when you graduated, but He swallowed hard. I put it up as collateral, to cover debts. Draven bought the lien as part of our deal. Arya's eyes shot to Kale, who looked unsurprised. I had it transferred back to your name, her father continued. It's yours again, free and clear. He paused, his voice dropping. It's not much, not compared to what I took from you, but it's something. You think a house makes up for selling your daughter? Arya's voice was quiet, deadly. No, nothing makes up for what I did. Her father's hands trembled around his cup. I know that. I live with it every day. But I needed you to know. I needed to say... He stopped, his composure cracking. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't mean anything. I know you'll never forgive me. But I'm sorry. Silence settled over the table, heavy and suffocating. Arya picked up the envelope, turning it over in her hands. You're right. It doesn't mean anything. Her father's face crumpled. But I'll take the house, she continued, her voice steady. Not because I forgive you. Not because this balances the scales, but because it was supposed to be mine, and you don't get to take anything else from me. She stood, tucking the envelope into her bag. Her father stood too, reaching out like he might touch her, then thinking better of it. I don't expect forgiveness, but maybe someday we could... No. Arya's voice was final. We're done. You made your choice. Now live with it. She turned and walked away, Kyle beside her, leaving her father standing alone in a cafe full of strangers. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm on her face. Arya took a deep breath, feeling something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness, but release. The severing of a tie that had been strangling her for months. You okay? Kale asked. Yeah. She looked up at him, surprised by the truth of it. I actually am. He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. Good. Because we have somewhere to be. Where? You'll see. The somewhere turned out to be a sleek office building downtown. Kyle led her through the lobby, into an elevator, up to the 15th floor. They walked down a hallway lined with frosted glass doors until he stopped at one near the end. The nameplate read, Silva Foundation. Arya's breath caught. What is this? Kale pushed open the door, revealing a small but beautifully appointed office. Modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows, a desk with a laptop and fresh flowers. It's yours, he said simply, if you want it. Arya stepped inside, her mind reeling. I don't understand. The war with Volkov. It exposed a lot of ugliness, a lot of people caught in the crossfire who didn't deserve it. Kyle moved to stand beside her at the windows. I thought maybe it was time to do something different. Use the resources I have to actually help instead of just control. A foundation, a nonprofit, community support, job training, legal aid for families affected by gang violence. He glanced at her. I thought you might want to run it. Use that economics degree for something that matters. Arya turned to him, tears burning at the back of her throat. You did this for me. I did this for us. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. You made me want to be better. Made me see that power doesn't have to be just about control. It can be about building something, helping people. I don't know the first thing about running a foundation. You'll learn. You're the smartest person I know. He smiled slightly. Besides, I hired the best staff I could find. They'll help. Arya laughed, the sound watery and disbelieving. You're serious about this? Completely. His expression sobered. I know I can't erase what I am, can't change the violence or the darkness, but maybe I can balance it. Use what I have to do some good in the world. He paused. With you. Arya threw her arms around his neck, kissing him hard. When they broke apart, she was smiling through tears. Yes, I want this. I want all of it. Boy, the next 3 months passed in a blur of purpose and transformation. Arya threw herself into the foundation, learning the ins and outs of nonprofit management, meeting with community leaders, developing programs. It was hard work, exhausting, sometimes frustrating. But for the first time in her life, she felt like she was doing something that mattered. Kale watched her bloom with something like awe. The girl who'd been handed over in a hangar at dawn had become a force in her own right, confident, determined, unwilling to accept easy answers or half measures. They fell into a rhythm. Mornings at the foundation, evenings at the penthouse, nights tangled together, learning each other in ways that went deeper than physical. Arya graduated on a clear May afternoon, walking across the stage to accept her diploma with Kyle in the audience, his expression filled with a pride that made her heart swell. Afterward, they celebrated with dinner at an absurdly expensive restaurant, just the two of them, talking about the future like it was something they could actually plan. "I've been thinking," Kyle said over dessert, his tone casual in that way that meant he'd been thinking about this for a while.
Dangerous, Arya teased. Smartass. But he smiled. "I want you to move into the master bedroom. Officially. Stop pretending you still sleep in the guest room when you haven't spent a night there in 2 months." Arya's heart skipped. It was such a small thing, just a room, just logistics, but it felt monumental. "You sure?"
"I've never been more sure of anything." His hand found hers across the table. "You're not a guest, Arya. You're not a transaction or a deal or a possession. You're—" He stopped, searching for words.
"What am I?"
she prompted softly. "Mine," he said simply, "and I'm yours. Completely." Arya's eyes burned.
"Yeah, okay. Yes." That night, they moved her things, the few belongings she'd kept in the guest room, into Kyle's space. Their space now. It felt like coming home.
6 months after the factory, on a crisp October evening, Kyle took Arya to the roof of his building. She'd never been up here before. The space was private, accessible only by a key Kyle carried. But tonight, he led her up the stairs, through a door, onto a rooftop garden she hadn't known existed. String lights hung overhead, casting everything in warm, golden light. A table was set for two, candles flickering in the breeze.
"What is this?"
Arya breathed. "An apology." Kale pulled out her chair. "For every terrible thing I put you through. For the hangar and the cage and the fear. For taking your choices away." "Kyle, let me finish." He sat across from her, his expression serious. "I can't change how this started. Can't take back the deal or the circumstances or any of it. But I can give you a choice now, a real one." He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small box. Arya's breath stopped. "This isn't an obligation," Kyle said, setting the box on the table between them. "It's not a transaction. It's me asking if you want to build something permanent, together. Because I love you, Arya Silva. I think I've loved you since the moment you stepped out of that car in the hangar and looked at me like I was something you refused to be afraid of." Arya's hand shook as she reached for the box, opening it to reveal a ring. Simple, elegant, a single diamond set in platinum. "I'm not expecting an answer tonight," Kyle continued. "Take your time, think about it. Make sure it's what you actually want, not what you feel obligated to." "Yes." He stopped mid-sentence. "What?" "Yes." Arya laughed, tears streaming down her face. "I don't need time. I don't need to think. The answer is yes." Kyle stared at her, something like disbelief crossing his features. Then he was moving, rounding the table, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She cupped his face, making him look at her. "I love you. I choose you, every day, every version of you. The darkness and the light, all of it." He kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, he took the ring from the box and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "We're really doing this," Arya said, staring at the ring, at the physical proof of this impossible thing they'd built. "We're really doing this," Kyle confirmed, his arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. They stood there on the rooftop, the city spread out below them, and Arya felt something she'd never thought she'd feel again after that morning in the hangar. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of something stronger. Something worth fighting for. They were married on a snowy December morning in a small ceremony at the penthouse. Just a handful of people, Marcus and a few of Kyle's trusted men. Liana as Arya's maid of honor, and a judge who'd known Kyle for years. Arya wore a simple white dress, no veil, her hair down. Kale wore a black suit, no tie. They faced each other in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, the snow falling softly outside, and spoke vows they'd written themselves. "I can't promise you easy," Kyle said, his voice rough with emotion. "I can't promise you safe or simple or normal. But I can promise you everything, all of me, for as long as I'm breathing." Arya's hands tightened on his. "I don't want easy. I just want real. And this, us, is the realest thing I've ever known. So yeah, I'm in. Forever." The judge pronounced them married. Kyle kissed her like he was drowning and she was air. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who mattered, Arya Silva, now Arya Draven, felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She'd been sold to end a war, had been traded like currency, like an asset, like something disposable. But somewhere in the darkness of that gilded cage, she'd found something unexpected. Freedom. Not the kind that came from running, but the kind that came from choosing. From standing beside someone and saying, "This is it. This is where I plant my flag. This is the hill I'll die on." She'd chosen Kale Draven, and he'd chosen her back. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no magic, no divine intervention, no promise that everything would be perfect. But it was theirs, built on blood and survival and the stubborn refusal to let the worst moments define them. He spoke. 3 years later, Arya sat in the Foundation office, reviewing grant applications, when her phone buzzed with a message from Kyle. "Kyle, come home early. Have a surprise for you." Arya. "Good surprise or we need to leave the country surprise?" Kyle. "Good, I promise." She smiled, saving her work and grabbing her bag. The Foundation had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. 3 full-time staff, partnerships with a dozen community organizations, real, measurable impact on the neighborhoods that had been hardest hit by gang violence. She'd found her purpose, her calling. And Kyle had been there for every step, supporting her, challenging her, loving her with an intensity that still took her breath away. The penthouse was quiet when she arrived, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. She found Kyle in what used to be his study, now converted into something else entirely. A nursery. Arya stopped in the doorway, her breath catching. The walls were painted a soft gray blue. A crib sat beneath the window, already assembled. Shelves lined one wall, ready for books and toys. A rocking chair occupied the corner, a soft blanket draped over the arm. Kale stood in the middle of the room, hands in his pockets, watching her with barely contained nervousness. "I know we haven't talked about this seriously," he said. "And I know it's presumptuous to build this without asking, but I've been thinking, I'm pregnant," Arya blurted out. Kale froze. "What?" "I found out this morning. I was going to tell you tonight, but..." She gestured at the room, laughing through sudden tears. "How did you know?" "I didn't." He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next. And I wanted to be ready. Wanted you to know that I'm ready, if that's something you want." "It's something I want." Arya pulled back, looking up at him. "Are you ready for this? Really ready? Because it's going to change everything. Everything's already changed." His hand came up, cupping her face. "The moment you chose to stay, everything changed. This is the next chapter." "The next chapter," Arya repeated, testing the words. "I like the sound of that." Their daughter was born on a sunny morning in July, 7 pounds, 9 ounces, with Kyle's dark hair and Arya's defiant eyes. They named her Elena, after Arya's grandmother, the one who'd left her the house upstate, the one who'd believed in fresh starts and second chances. Kale held her with a reverence that broke Arya's heart and rebuilt it stronger. This man, this dangerous, violent, complicated man, cradled their daughter like she was made of spun glass and starlight. "I'm going to do better for her," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. "Be better. The world she grows up in, it's going to be safer than the one we survived." "We'll make it safer," Arya corrected, her hand on his shoulder. "Together." 5 years after the hangar, Arya stood in the backyard of her grandmother's house, watching Elena run through the grass, her laughter bright and pure. They spent weekends here now, away from the city, away from the foundation and the business and the weight of everything they'd built. Here, they were just a family. Kyle emerged from the house carrying lemonade, settling into the chair beside Arya's. "She's fast," he observed as Elena chased a butterfly. "She gets that from you. And the stubbornness from you." Arya laughed. "Fair." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter play, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. "Do you ever think about it?" Arya asked finally. "The hangar. That morning." "Every day," Kale said quietly. "Can't help it. It's where everything started." "Do you regret it?" He turned to her, and the look in his eyes was answer enough. "Not even a little." "Do you?" Arya thought about it. Really thought about it. About the fear and the anger and the months of fighting herself and him and the terrible reality of how they'd come together. "No," she said finally. "I don't. Because look what came from it." She gestured at Elena, at the house, at the life they'd built. "None of this exists without that morning. Doesn't make what I did right. No, but it makes what we became worth it." She reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. "We took something ugly and made it beautiful. That's not nothing." Kale lifted her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I love you. More than I knew how to say in the beginning. More than I thought I was capable of." "I know," Arya smiled. "I love you too. Even when I didn't want to. Even when I tried not to. I loved you anyway." Elena ran up to them, out of breath, her cheeks flushed. "Daddy, come see! There's a bird's nest in the tree!" Kale stood, letting Elena drag him toward the old oak at the edge of the property. Arya watched them go, her heart full in a way she'd never imagined possible. This was her life now. Not the one she'd planned, not the one she'd expected, but the one she'd chosen. Built from the wreckage of a transaction that was supposed to be cold and clean. From a morning in a hangar where she'd been handed over like currency. From months of fighting and fear and the slow, terrifying realization that the monster she'd been traded to wasn't a monster at all. Just a man. Complicated and violent and capable of extraordinary love. And she was just a woman. Stubborn and fierce and willing to fight for what she wanted. Together, they'd built an empire. Not the kind measured in territories or money, but the kind measured in quiet mornings and shared laughter, and a daughter who would grow up knowing she was loved beyond measure. The war that had brought them together was long over. The enemies defeated or neutralized, the threats dissolved into memory. What remained was this: breakfast on Sunday mornings, the foundation changing lives one family at a time, Elena's laughter echoing through the house, Kael's hand finding hers in the dark, the slow, steady building of a life worth living. Arya Silva had been traded to end a war, but Arya Draven had ended up with something infinitely more valuable: a home, a family, a love that had survived everything the world had thrown at it. And as the sun set over the yard, painting everything in shades of gold and amber, as Kael lifted Elena onto his shoulders, and she shrieked with delight, as Arya stood and joined them beneath the old oak tree, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She'd make the same choice 1,000 times over. Every single time, she'd choose him. Every single time, she'd choose this. Because in the end, the cage had never been the penthouse or the rules or the life he'd pulled her into. The cage had been her own fear, her own resistance. And the moment she'd stopped fighting it, the moment she'd chosen to stay, she'd found something she'd been searching for her whole life without knowing it. Freedom. Not from him, but with him. And that made all the difference.